Good afternoon, class. Any doubts you have from the previous class? Production, consumption, factors of production, households, firms. Is it all clear? Financial inclusion and all. So we'll start with the next economic actor. So you're discussing circular flow. The role of these two are clear. The household is responsible for providing the factors of production. In return, the firms are going to pay them the income. What all can they do with this income? This income can be consumed and this income can be saved. Whatever the firm will sell, that is equal to your consumption. This is what we discussed. And also the concept of savings. What is the meaning of savings? Saving is something, part of the income which is not consumed or anything which is sacrificing for future use. This saving can be converted into investment. What do you mean by investment? Meaning of investment is capital expenditure. Capital good creation, asset creation is investment. What the households, when they put the money in bank, stock markets, anything, that is all considered as savings. एक उनकी financial savings है, which is done in the stock market or banks. एक उनकी physical savings है, which they do in gold, cash or real estate. So saving can be considered as a leakage. Investment is considered as an injection to the economy, which increases the flow. How is the investment increasing the flow? Because there is an addition of more capital goods. More capital goods mean more technology or more efficiency. Are the meanings clear here? We also discussed the concept of capital output ratio. What is capital output ratio? First, concept of saving turning into investment. What is this called? This is called as capital formation because we are adding in more assets. Investment turning into more output. That would be capital output ratio or incremental capital output ratio. How much of capital is required to generate output of 1 unit? Additional capital required to generate 1 unit. What is the implication of a higher COR or ICOR? Meaning of COR or ICOR, if it is high or it is low. It can depict two things. One, how efficiently the capital is being used. And the other is the capital intensity. It can be high either because the capital is being wasted. It can be high because it depends on the nature of the project. If the nature of the project is capital intensive, तब भी आपका COR और ICOR की value high हो सकती है. Is this clear? All concept of capital. Then the next actor is the government. So household and firms, the role is clear. What is the role of government in the economy? What does the government do? Household is responsible for consumption, household is responsible for saving, and household provides factors of production. What does the government do in the economy? Can? Okay, why do they give subsidies? Vulnerable. क्यों? And is that the main function of the government? क्यों आएगा? फर्म क्यों नहीं कर सकती? फर्म का भी तो कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन का फंक्शन है. So, right now, what are the who is doing most of the capital formation in the country? Government का थोड़ी इतना significant है. Yes, public investment I'm not saying is less, but it's private is also investing significantly high. किसी भी society में government है क्यों? Regulation of what? Regulator is a very broad function. Market को regulate करने के लिए you'll not have government also, you'll have independent regulators. For example, RBI is not a government body. RBI is an independent regulator. Election Commission is an independent regulator. SEBI is an independent regulator. There could be some factors controlled by the government on these regulatory bodies, but ये independent बनाई जाती हैं ताकि government इनको influence ना करे. तो we cannot say regulation as a function of the government. To some extent that is true, but अगर आप regulation कह भी रहे तो what is the first step of regulation? Why should a government exist? And then we'll discuss why the government is there in an economy. पहले तो state या government की requirement क्या है? Why the state should exist? Equitable. So there is a lot of inequality in US. Is the state doing anything to control that, or even in India? वो बहुत late function है. See what I'll explain. हमारा subject कहाँ से start हुआ है? Resources have to be converted into, because we want to fulfill. That means there's a lot of scarcity. And if you read any political thinker, कि state चाहिए क्यों? Whether it is Rousseau, any Hegel, any political thinker, what they say is when the human beings are in a situation of scarcity, what can scarcity lead to? Scarcity can lead to conflict. Who resolves this conflict? This is what is the role of government and its administration. Politics plus administration is to resolve all of these conflicts. At the end of the day, this decision with respect to which resource should be converted to what goods and services, how it should be distributed. All of these decisions are taken by the politics of the country. Whether it is capitalism, socialism, economic system, कौन सा होना चाहिए वो decision making तो यहीं पे है. And decision making implementation will be done by the administration. So that means the whole reason of government or administration, though every thinker gave a different explanation, but they all agreed to one point, that the government or its administration is meant to provide stability in terms of ensuring law and order. ये सबसे basic function है. So the first thing which the government has to do is that they have to ensure stability. Production consumption नहीं हो सकते if the situation is there is a conflict. For example, if Manipur is facing widespread conflict between any two ethnicities, you cannot have any production or consumption. तो जब तक government administration order restore नहीं करेगी, ना ही आपका socialism चल सकता है, ना capitalism चल सकता है, कोई system नहीं चल सकता. So the first role of the government is to provide stability, law and order. Law and order also includes the judicial functions, that we not only have to prevent, even when the conflict happens, how do you resolve the conflict? So prevention and resolution दोनों काम है. Prevention में आपका police and the administration works, and resolution once the conflict happens is done by the judicial organ. This is why administration के 3 functions हैं और 3 ही उसके parts हैं. One is law and order, the policing service. One is the judicial function, and the third is the army function, external law and order problem. The public order maintain करता police, external war aggression से you have the army. So these are the 3 organs of administration: army, judicial, and the internal policing functions. And internal policing function is what UPSC comes in the domain, जो वो exam कराता है. Judicial or army is not the domain of UPSC. Now this is one function. What else is the function of government? One, they have to ensure stability, law and order, and judicial functions. What else is the government doing? ये basic function है. और क्या function है government का? Any rough idea? You all have done polity, you no idea कि क्या करती है government. When you said that the government has to create capital goods, why does the government have to create capital goods? For example, mostly we say government has to create infrastructure. Why should the government create infrastructure? Why are we not letting the private sector do that? So, private sector नहीं कर सकता long-term development. Price will be the issue. So that means if private sector does it, there could be some sort of exclusion. Anything else? See, infrastructure and others, yes. See, the reason why we do it, though you are coming, वो implication वो भी एक सही है, but why exactly infrastructure should be done by the government? Because infrastructure services are called as public goods. Firms will never do this type of a good. Now, what are public goods? Public goods have 2 features. One, public good is non-rival in nature. That means if it is consumed by one person, it will not be reduced for the other. So if the government has built a street light, if a particular household is using the street light or roads on the vehicles are using that particular street light, तो एक घर ने use किया या एक vehicle ने use किया doesn't mean it is reduced for the other person. Even when you use a road, the road is still available for other people. You use the airport, you use the railway station, everything is still available. That means it is a good which is non-rival in nature. Non-rival means consumption by one does not reduce it for the other person. The other feature of a public good is that the public good is non-excludable in nature. What do we mean by non-excludable? That you can't stop someone from using this product. So public goods are having two features. Non-rival, consumed by one, doesn't reduce it for the availability of other. Non-excludable, consumed by one, doesn't reduce it for the availability of others. You can't stop someone from using it. ये consumption कम नहीं होगा. You can't exclude someone from this. Now, what is the problem in this type of a good? Now, any particular firm who is ready to provide a public good, if it can't exclude anyone, if it can't stop someone from using it, that means there would be some people who would not pay for the service. For example, if street light is built by a firm and this street light is giving light to 5 different households, एक locality में 5 household है और street light firm ने बनाई. अब firm बनाएगी profit के लिए. Now if the firm is making this for profit, 3 of the households are giving them money to stop paying the money. 2 महीने पैसे दिए, 2 महीने के बाद पैसे नहीं देंगे. If they don't give the money, what can the firm do with them? Take away the how? कैसे? अगर स्ट्रीट लाइट है आप उसको कैसे रोकोगे रोकने से? How will you stop them? This is what is the problem of public good. It is non-excludable. You can't stop them. For example, if a railway station using the railway service, you find number of people are traveling without tickets. Can you stop them completely? There would still be people. That means there would be people who would not be paying the service. If they're not paying the service, आप ये तो नहीं है ट्रेन चलाना बंद कर दोगे. So those people who are not paying for the service, these are called as free riders. Free riders means using the service but not paying for it. So अगर कोई ऐसा good है जो non-excludable है, firm will always find the problem of free rider. If they can't stop people from using it, will the firm provide that good? The firm will never be ready to provide the good because जितने free rider हैं, तीनों भी बंद कर देंगे पैसे देना कल से. Even they will stop. Why should they pay when they are not paying? So that means I have a very major problem of free rider. Free rider means that all of this is a loss. Firm will never do anything for loss. That means those goods which are non-rival and non-excludable in nature, these goods can only be provided by the government. Firm will never provide it because firm will always face the problem of free riders. So reason why the government does most of the infrastructure is that infrastructure assets are non-rival and non-excludable in nature. This is why the firms will not be ready to provide it. Firms will not be ready to provide it, and infrastructure is important for any economy. They should be available. Another reason can be made here is if you exclude that particular service. For example, you have a toll on a road. If you have a toll on a road, that means you will exclude number of people. Now, if you exclude number of people, because those who can't pay the toll will not be able to use the road. If you exclude number of people, whether people should be excluded from infrastructure assets or not. Should any economy provide any service which is excluding number of people? For example, yesterday or today, Blinkit has launched an ambulance service. अब Blinkit की ambulance service बोल रही है कि 10 मिनट में ambulance मिलेगी, but 2000 रुपए में मिलेगी. That means those people who don't have 2000 rupees, where will they go? So should the ambulance, the access to ambulance, be dependent on the person's capability to pay? The nature of the good is such that you should not exclude anyone because they don't have money. So socio-economic welfare point se bhi, people should not be excluded from the usage of public goods. Even though some goods you can exclude by having a fees, but the good is so important for the development of the population, you should not make it contingent that they first pay the fees and then use the good. क्योंकि जिसके पास पैसे नहीं है वो नहीं use कर पाएंगे. That is a major problem from the socio-economic welfare point. This is why public goods should be created by the government. Firm should not create these public goods, both from welfare perspective and also because it has always will have the problem of free riders. This is why the government should provide public goods. So the government, one is providing public goods, the government is providing stability. What else should the government do? Is this clear why infrastructure public goods should be done by the government? What else should the government do? When you said welfare, why should the government do welfare? Reduce? What we had witnessed is, and this is a very recent phenomena, 50 years old phenomena, 50, 70 years old. This is not a very conventional role of the government. Now, when we said resources have to be converted into goods and services, what we found out was whoever is taking this decision to produce or even distribute, there was significant amount of inequality that existed in the system because the distribution was not proportional. Profit is more to the entrepreneur as compared to what the wages are being given. So if the inequality in distribution socialism में भी है और capitalism में भी है, दोनों में अगर ये same problem है, so that means this inequality in distribution can lead to significant amount of conflict. अब एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट तो रिसोर्स के लिए, अब आपने जो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ प्रोसेस बनाया, प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस, उसमें भी इनइक्वालिटी है. इफ दैट ब्रिंग्स इन इनइक्वालिटी, हाउ एग्जैक्टली वुड यू सॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम? This problem would be solved by the government performing the function of redistribution, or what you can say, the government can perform the function of welfare of the people who are vulnerable. It's not for all, only for some sections of the societies which we think is vulnerable. I'll tell you, expressway everyone has to pay, still road is a public good. No. There, when the road is a public good, उसका हमने nature of the public good has been diluted. हमने उसको exclusionary बना दिया by giving a toll. So there the role is not a perfect public good, because in some situations you have created a condition where it is not showing the feature of non-excludability. एक होते हैं pure public goods जिनके features हर condition में true हैं, non-excludable, non-rival. But sometimes they become rival and excludable in some conditions only. Then it is called as an impure public good. For example, if the road has complete traffic, now if you are using it, can someone else also use it? अगर रोड पूरा जैम पैक्ड है, यू आर यूजिंग द रोड, आर यू रिड्यूसिंग द कंजम्पशन फॉर समवन एल्स? अगर रोड पूरा भरा है तो क्या आप कंजम्पशन नहीं रोक रहे किसी और का? सो इन दैट पर्टिकुलर केस रोड हैज बिकम राइवल. सो व्हेन पब्लिक गुड्स इन सम कंडीशंस लूज देयर फीचर्स, दीज आर कॉल्ड एज इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड्स. तो अगर आपने रोड पे टोल लगा दिया, ये रोड पूरा जैम है, दोनों में उसके कंडीशंस लूज हो रहे हैं, फीचर्स लूज हो रहे हैं. इफ फीचर्स आर लॉस्ट, दे आर कॉल्ड एज इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड्स. तो पब्लिक प्राइवेट प्रोजेक्ट्स में जब हम रोड पे टोल लगा रहे हैं, इट नो लॉन्गर रिमेन्स अ प्योर पब्लिक गुड, इट हैज बिकम एन इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड बिकॉज यू पुट अ टोल. नाउ redistribution welfare can be done through the government only for the vulnerable section, and this in Indian context is all the more important because this function the Indian government has accepted in its directive principles of state policy. The nature of welfare state could be different in different states, different countries. In India, it is an obligation because it has been mentioned in its constitution. They talk about socialist principles, that is socio-economic welfare. So the three roles of the government is, the government has to do redistribution or welfare, the government has to provide public goods, and the government has to first provide stability, law and order. ये तीन major functions हैं for any general government. Now if the government has to perform these three functions, how will the government perform these three functions? Three functions. One is stability, other is provision of non-marketable goods, that is public goods, and finally it is welfare. Right? These are the three functions. How will they perform these three functions? अब इसके लिए रिसोर्स चाहिए. अब रिसोर्स कहाँ से आएगा? प्रोड्यूसर तो नहीं है गवर्नमेंट. इवन इफ इट इज अ प्रोड्यूसर ओनली ऑफ पब्लिक गुड्स विच इट हैज टू प्रोवाइड फॉर फ्री, इट कैन नॉट चार्ज एनी मनी बिकॉज चार्जिंग मनी मीन्स एक्सक्लूडेबल. अगर आपको गवर्नमेंट ने रोड, पानी, किसी के लिए भी कुछ भी चार्ज किया, चार्ज मीन्स द राइट प्राइस. It could be coming for free or it could be coming at a highly subsidized price. For example, whatever roads you have used today, all of those roads were not charging any price. क्योंकि जैसे ही चार्ज हो जाएगा फिर एक्सक्लूजन होना शुरू हो जाएगा. So how will the government provide all of this? Yes, for this the government will levy something called as tax. Now what do you mean by a tax? इन तीनों सर्विसेज को प्रोवाइड करने के लिए गवर्नमेंट नीड्स सर्टन रिसोर्स. हाउ डज इट गेट द रिसोर्स? इट लेवाइज अ टैक्स ऑन इट्स पॉपुलेशन. वन टैक्स विच इज डायरेक्ट एंड द अदर इज इनडायरेक्ट. ये दोनों टैक्सेस लगाते हैं. विल डिस्कस हाउ टैक्सेशन बोथ आर डिफरेंट. नाउ इफ द गवर्नमेंट इज लेवाइंग दिस टैक्स, व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द मीनिंग ऑफ अ टैक्स? And how is tax different from any other payment? You all have heard tax. Popcorn का तो सुना ही होगा, 18% कैरामल में. तो क्या होता है टैक्स? What is the tax? First thing different between tax and the other payment is, when you want to buy something, when you pay something, it's a choice that you want to pay for something because you want that good. But tax has one feature, the tax has no choice. That means it is a compulsory payment. It is a legal obligation. Anything else? हाँ, लीगल ऑब्लिगेशन है कि आपको चॉइस नहीं, देना ही पड़ेगा, गवर्नमेंट ने लगा दिया, यू हैव टू पे इट. एनीथिंग एल्स, इट इज फिक्स्ड. इट कैन चेंज ऑल्सो. तो every budget it can change. Even outside the budget, you can change with the GST Council. That is not a feature. Change that depends on the government. जो authority है वो it can change. It's not a feature. Anything else which special about tax? नहीं, वो तो nature of tax है, progressive है, regressive है. That's the nature of tax, how system are designed. Another important feature of taxes which is different from payment is that tax is a unilateral payment. That means government will receive the tax from household and firm, and when the government receives the tax from household and firm, they are not going to get anything in return from it. Any transaction which you do in the market is a bilateral transaction. Bilateral transaction means you give goods and services and the other person pays you the money. That means it's a two-way transaction. Tax is a one-way transaction. So if the household has paid 10 lakh rupees as tax to the government, household cannot expect a specific benefit of 10 lakh. Whatever the government does, there is no specific benefit received in return for the money you have given. All of the tax that has been paid is always given for a general benefit of the population. General benefit means it is never given for a special benefit कि मैंने इतना टैक्स दिया, मुझे गवर्नमेंट ने क्या दिया. This is a wrong question or a wrong argument to make. It was never for a specific benefit. हमने आपको law and order दिया है. It doesn't mean that we are charging anything for it. So it's a general stability fees which we are charging because it is a unilateral. You don't get anything in return. So any tax will have these two features. You don't have a choice and it is a unilateral payment. So the government performs three functions. The government provides stability, redistribution and public goods for which the government will charge a tax. Any tax is a legal obligation, a compulsion, and secondly, it is a unilateral payment. You don't get anything in return. It's for the general benefit of the society, not for a specific benefit for the person who has paid. It's a general benefit. Is this clear? You can write this down, role of government. Government in any particular society performs three functions. First, ensuring stability. Through its administration. Second, provision of public goods. In this itself, in this point, right? Public goods are characterized by two features. Provision of public goods. Public goods are characterized by two features. One, non-rival consumption. Which means consumption by one individual. Non-rival consumption, which means consumption by one individual does not reduce it for others. Second, non-excludable consumption. Which means no one can be excluded from. Consumption of that good or service. No one can be excluded from consumption of that good or service. Is it clear what are public goods? Non-rival and non-excludable. Why the firm will not provide it? Because firm will face the problem of free rider. Are these concepts clear? In bracket you can write down. goods that are non-rival, goods that are non-rival but excludable, non-rival but excludable are called as club goods. Non-rival but excludable are called as club goods. Can you give an example of this? Non-rival but excludable. What? How? So वो एक particular case में road होगा. What you're saying is road is a particular service which can become a club good if you have a toll. तो एक particular instance में ही. I'm just talking about वो generally भी true होना चाहिए. आपने एक exceptional case बनाया कि नॉन राइवल है बट एक्सक्लूडेबल है, वो रोड होगा जब वो लूज करता है अपना कैरेक्टर. दैट इज वाई रोड कम्स अंडर द कैटेगरी ऑफ इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड्स. व्हेन आई टोल्ड यू पब्लिक गुड्स आर नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल, नॉन राइवल, बट इन सर्टन सिचुएशंस दे माइट लूज देयर फीचर्स. व्हेन दे लूज देयर फीचर्स दे आर कॉल्ड एज इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड्स. फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक पार्क है, पार्क इज बोथ नॉन राइवल नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल. आप जाओगे पार्क तो दूसरों के लिए भी अवेलेबल है. यू कांट स्टॉप समवन फ्रॉम कमिंग टू द पार्क, बट द मोमेंट द पार्क इज फुल, then it becomes rival because you are using it, you are stopping someone else from consuming it. Similarly, the moment the road is jam packed, no new car can come in, तो आपका कंजम्पशन उसको रोक रहा है. तो उन दो सिचुएशंस में वो गुड ने अपना कैरेक्टरिस्टिक लूज कर दिया. दैट इज वाई इट इज एन इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड. बट इन जनरल इट इज अ पब्लिक गुड, इट्स नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल नॉन राइवल, बट कुछ सिचुएशंस में ही कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स लूज हुई. दैट इज अ इम्प्योर पब्लिक गुड. बट क्लब गुड्स इन जनरल वुड बी ट्रू. वट कुड बी क्लब गुड्स? नॉन राइवल एंड एक्सक्लूडेबल. How? How? That could be true. Club का नाम से ही समझ आना चाहिए. Club is a club good. Entry into the club is a fees. But if you enter into the club, you are not reducing the service from some other. It's a non-rival. Watching movie in a cinema hall, going to a stadium, all of them are excludable क्योंकि दोनों में fees है. But it is non-rival. You watch the match, it is available for the other person also. Even in this class. This is excludable. How? You have to pay a fees. It's non-rival. You are watching the class. It is available equal for the other person also. These are all examples of club goods. What could be the example of the opposite? Rival but non-excludable. Rival and non-excludable. That is, you can't stop someone from using it. But if you use it, it is not available for the other person. कैसे? राइवल कैसे होगा? आई एम आस्किंग द ऑपोजिट नाउ. राइवल बट नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल. राइट डाउन. राइवल बट नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल आर कॉल्ड एज कॉमन गुड्स. राइवल बट नॉट excludable but non-excludable, are called as common goods. What could be the example? How? Non-excludable कैसे है? राइवल तो है कि सर्विस एक यूज करेगा तो दूसरे को नहीं है, बट एक्सक्लूजन भी तो है. कैन एनीवन यूज द हॉस्पिटल? क्यों? उसमें ही फीस है. नो, तो 5 रुपये तो होने चाहिए. तो एक्सक्लूजन तो 5 पे भी है, चाहे 5,000 पे भी है. नॉट एवरी पर्सन हैज 5 रुपीज. वो आप एक केस बना रहे बट वो एक्सक्लूडेबल है. समथिंग विच इज नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल, आपको किसी को रोक नहीं सकते हो. व्हाट कुड बी दैट? फूड प्रोडक्ट्स लाइक सॉल्ट. हाउ? सॉल्ट कैसे आप खरीदोगे? कैसे नहीं कर सकते? एक्सक्लूड तो कर सकते हैं ना. सॉल्ट कैसे में पैसे का मिलेगा? माइनिंग भी करोगे सॉल्ट की तो उसमें भी कुछ ना कुछ रिसोर्स चाहिए होगी. अगर आप कहो कि सी वाटर को इवेपोरेट करूंगा, इवेपोरेट हवा में तो नहीं होगा. इवेपोरेशन के लिए भी यू विल हैव टू ब्रिंग सर्टेन थिंग्स. इफ यू माइन सॉल्ट दैट आल्सो रिक्वायर रिसोर्स. Water availability could be one, or more specific could be fishing in the open sea. Fishing in the river. Can you stop someone from fishing? But if you will take the fish, it is not available for the other person. Or grazing of animals in an open field. Anyone can take an animal for grazing, but if your animal is going to eat some grass, that grass is not available for the other person. So fishing in a river or grazing of animals on a land, that all are common goods. They are non-excludable. You can't stop anyone from doing that. But it is rival. You could take it. It is not available for the other person. So public good is non-excludable, non-rival. Private good is both excludable and rival. Common good is rival but non-excludable, and club good is non-rival but excludable. These are the examples of different types of goods depending on whether it is being reduced and excludability. Rival and exclusion pe, public good is non-rival and non-excludable. It's not or, it is and. Both features should be true at the same time. Is this clear? Club goods and common goods. Next, right, third function of a state. The government is also responsible for redistribution or welfare of redistribution or welfare of the disadvantaged and vulnerable section of the society. Disadvantaged and vulnerable section of the society. In the next line, right? For performing these three functions, the government collects a tax from its population. Government collects a tax from its population where tax is a legal obligation which means there is no consent. Legal obligation, which means there is no consent or choice involved. And it is a unilateral transfer. It is a unilateral transfer which means there are no specific benefits received in return. There are no specific benefits received in return. Are the functions clear? What exactly is the meaning of a tax and what are the functions of the government? ये तीन function perform करने के लिए resource चाहिए. Resource is tax. Tax, there's no choice, you have to pay. And secondly, you can't expect a return. It's a unilateral transfer. Government decide करेगी कैसे वो tax use करना है. वो कैसे use करना है? We have a democratic system. We have a parliamentary democracy. वो लोगों का पैसा आप कैसे use करोगे? वो parliament से authorization लेते हैं. This is called as the budget. Every year, how much you collect from the people, how much you can collect further, and how much whatever you have collected, how will you use that? Expenditure and receipt. कहाँ से पैसे आएंगे, कहाँ use होंगे? That is to be authorized by the parliament. So this is why whenever a budget fails, the government fails. Because main role of the government is how to use the taxpayers' money. Government का और कोई resource नहीं है. The government might perform the role of a firm. This is called as a public sector enterprise, but this is not true for all economies. This is why we have not mentioned it as an example of general government के वो function है. वो कुछ economies में जो socialism है, वो ही economies practice कर रही हैं. They also produce something and sell it at a price. That is the commercial function of the government, which is called as public sector enterprise or state-owned enterprise. So that is not when we discuss the role of the government. वो role नहीं है, उन्होंने additional एक काम किया है खुद से. So that is role of a firm. What we discussed yesterday, firm is for production. We did not discuss कि firm private थी कि government थी. वो firm दोनों हो सकता है, government owned और privately owned. Why government owned firms exist? That also I give you an idea in industrial policy कि PSU Indian government ने क्यों बनाए थे. But is this clear? Now, how will on these three functions and tax, how will the government be related to the economy? We had the circular flow of model of firm and household. Now, how will the government be involved here? How is the government related to household? Functions clear hai? So how will be the government related to the household? One, household can pay tax. What else can the household be related to the government? Public goods. So public goods government directly household को कैसे देगी? What is a subsidy? What do you mean by subsidy? Compensation in price for what? I'll just tell you, just like tax is a unilateral payment, similarly, government can pay unilateral transfers to its household or firms. Tax was paid. Government can also provide certain types of transfer payments. What is the meaning of transfer payment? Transfer payment are unilateral payment given by the government for different purposes. That means the government is not expecting anything in return. Now this transfer payment can be of two types. One type of a transfer payment is called as a subsidy. Subsidy is a type of a transfer payment which the government usually gives for aid in production. हम चाहते हैं production improve हो, farmer को we are giving fertilizer subsidy, we are giving power subsidy, we are giving him 6,000 rupees as cash. All of this is to aid the production of that particular segment, whether agriculture, industry, services. Production के लिए हमने वो subsidy दी है. Otherwise, the government can also give transfer payment in the form of welfare payments. Now, what could be welfare payments? For example, right now, number of state governments are giving 2,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees to women. Those payments are not given for production. Those payments are given for their welfare. Similarly, government can give scholarships to certain sections of the society where they think they should access education. That is also a welfare payment. Scholarships, pensions. Government has number of pension schemes for old age, for widows, for differently able. That National Social Assistance Program में जो हर महीने 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 different states can also have different. Those are called as welfare payments. So something which is given for production is subsidy. Something which is given for welfare is welfare payment. Both of them are transfer payments, are unilateral payments coming from the government to the household and firms. तो government household से tax लेती है, government household को welfare payments देगी. Similarly, firm will pay tax and the firm might be getting subsidy. Is this clear? How exactly the government is helping? Welfare payments and this subsidy. What else can the government be related? How else can the government be related? ये तो उसका एक welfare function हो गया. How else it can be related? Whenever the government provides public goods or the government provides administration, how can the government provide that administration? Manpower कहाँ से आएगी? Households are the ones which will provide them the factor of production. What factor of production will the households provide? They will provide them labor. In return, the government will pay them wages, or what we say, compensation. Right? Similarly, if I have to provide the administration, I will need goods and services. Goods and services, how? Table चाहिए, electricity चाहिए. From where does this service come from? From. And also for providing public goods, if the government is involved in its construction, administration उसका PWD department road बना रहा है. So from where will the material come for those construction? Firms. So that means the firm is going to, and the government is going to pay them the payments for this. This is how the government will be related. पिछले केस में what we said, जो भी फर्म प्रोड्यूस करेगा वो हाउसहोल्ड खरीदेगा, बट अब जो भी फर्म प्रोड्यूस करेगा वो गवर्नमेंट और हाउसहोल्ड दोनों खरीद सकता है. This is how the government is related. You can make this circular flow. How is the government related to firm and household? Government related to firm and household. Like वही तो हो गया ना, सब्सिडी इंसेंटिव ही तो है. ट्रांसफर पेमेंट उनको पैसे दे रहे हैं ताकि आप वो सेमीकंडक्टर लगाओ. आपको एक चीज़ मिलती मार्केट में 10,000 की, हम आपको 2,000 की दिला रहे हैं, तो वो 8,000 रुपये कहाँ से आए? दैट इज सब्सिडी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल PDS grains. Government gives rice, wheat or coarse grains 5 kgs for free. What is that? द हाउस होल्ड इज गेटिंग अ, वो चीज़ फ्री में मिल रही है तो डायरेक्ट पैसे मिल रहे हैं, चीज़ फ्री में मिल रही है, दोनों चीज़ें वेलफेयर है. Newspaper uses the term for both broadly as subsidy. Why I have created a difference between subsidy and welfare? Because welfare payment GDP में count नहीं होती है, subsidy count होती है. Because subsidy is something related to production. This is the reason why I have created a difference. Otherwise, these two words are used interchangeably. Subsidy and welfare payments, broadly सब चीज़ को subsidy ही बोल रहा है. But why I have created the difference for you is because there is difference in how they are estimated in GDP. Is this clear? Now, if I want to know what is the total output of this economy, the total output of this economy I can measure through any method. In the last class we discussed for measuring the total output, I can measure the total expenditure, I can measure the total income, or I can measure the total production. This is how I can calculate the total output. Now, if I calculate the total expenditure, who all are making expenditure in this economy? The expenditure is done by household, that is called as consumption expenditure. This is household doing the consumption. Who else is spending money? Government is spending money. Government spending money, that can be called as the government expenditure. Who else is spending money? Firms are spending money. What is it called? What the firm is spending on? Production. So how? वो तो इनकम होगी ना जो वो प्रोडक्शन कर रहा है, उसके अलावा कौन सा एक्सपेंडिचर कर रहा है फर्म? द गवर्नमेंट और द फर्म इज डूइंग इन्वेस्टमेंट. So the firm is investing, government is making expenditures, and the household is also consuming. Income is received by whom? Factors of production. So if who gets this income? Who is providing factors in this economy? Household. So जो household को income मिलती है, what can they do with this income? The income is received on factors, and factors are provided by household. So whatever the income is received by this household, who is going to, or the household can do what all things with that income? The household can do consumption. What else? The household can save. Anything else? Invest. वो savings ही है. Remember I told you difference between investment and savings. वो savings है, उनकी investment नहीं है. Investment means addition to capital goods. Anything else? Now they have to pay tax to the government also. Right? Now if they have to do this, that means I can cancel out these two. Government expenditure plus investment expenditure is equal to savings plus tax. Saving is equal to G minus T. I move T here plus I. In the last class we discussed whatever savings will be available is equal to I. Same hoga ye. But now we have involved the government also. That means saving is equal to G minus T plus I. Is this equation clear? Saving is G minus T plus I. When can be G minus T be positive? When the government expenditure is more than X. Okay, मेरा collection हुआ 100 रुपए का, मेरा expenditure is done of 150. That means 50 rupees. From where will this 50 come? G is greater than T, or when can government spend more than what it collects? Tax से तो ज़्यादा spend हो रहा है. अगर how can anyone spend more than what their income is? इनकम से ज़्यादा स्पेंड कैसे कर सकता है कोई? यही क्वेश्चन है. अब आप कह रहे हो इनकम बढ़ जाए, इनकम तो बढ़ भी जाए तो भी मेरी स्पेंडिंग इनकम से ज़्यादा है. यस, ओनली व्हेन दे आर बोरोइंग. दैट मीन्स वट एवर सेविंग्स आर अवेलेबल इन द इकोनॉमी, either it will be borrowed by government or it will be borrowed by firm. So the total savings that are available, they are now distributed between government and firm. This equation means this is the total savings. Either it is going to government or it is going to firm. If it goes to government, that means less is available for the firm. जितना government borrow करती जाएगी उतना ही कम होगा. If the government doesn't borrow, that means G is equal to T. In that particular case, S will be equal to. But if the government is borrowing, I is not equal to S. The firm is getting less. Not just that. So the first thing that is happening is when the government is borrowing, whatever the firms can borrow, this particular amount is going, क्योंकि at the end of the day वो savings ही borrow कर सकते हैं दोनों लोग. I don't have extra amount coming from somewhere. So 100 rupees is the total savings of the household. अब वो firm ले चाहे government ले. अगर government ने 20 ले लिया, 80 is left. Government ने 40 ले लिया, 60 is left. Because in any particular case, firm will be ready to give a loan to whom first? The government or the firm? Government. Why? Because government is more trustworthy. I know the money is going to come back. So firms will borrow less. First problem. Second thing, if the government decides to borrow in the economy and government has already taken, G minus T has already taken 20 rupees, I has remaining 80. But if the government decides to borrow more, that is government decides to borrow 40 and 60 is left. If this happens, what will be the cost of borrowing? In the first case, government is borrowing 20, firms are borrowing 80. Next case, government is now borrowing more. If the government decides to borrow more, will the government have to pay a higher rate of interest or less rate of interest? अगर कोई भी पैसे ले रखे हैं उसके बाद दोबारा लेता है उसको कम पे मिलेगा ज़्यादा पे? तो 20 अगर उन्होंने 3% पे लिए, 40 उनको कितने परसेंट पे मिलेंगे? More than 3. It could be 4%, it could be 5%, right? Now, if it is 3% for the government, how much will the firm get it for? Will it get less or more? Less. Why less? If you have to give money to the government and the firm, who is more trustworthy? Government. तो trustworthy को आप ज़्यादा interest rate charge करोगे, कम interest rate? कम charge करोगे. That means 3% is for government. Anyone else who wants to borrow in the economy will get more than the government. Government से ज़्यादा तो कोई trustworthy नहीं है. Anyone who borrows apart from the government, they are going to get at 3%. In the same, if the government gets it for more, the firm will also get it for more. So what is happening when the government borrows? Not only the firms are getting less, the firms are also getting it at a higher value. This particular phenomena is called as crowding out. Inflation भी होगा, but crowding out of private sector investment. Whenever the government borrows in the economy, there are less funds available for the firms. Not only less funds available, but the cost of the funds is also high. When the cost of funds is getting high and I'm getting less money, this is called as crowding out. So you can note down this equation first. Expenditure is equal to income is equal to production. Expenditure is C plus I plus G. Income is C plus S plus T. That means S is equal to G minus T plus I. G minus T means government is borrowing. Once you draw this equation, or you write this equation, below this write or you can say G is greater than T, S has to be greater than I. That means firms are not using the total savings. Government भी अब savings use कर रहा है. This is why we say fiscal deficit is not good for the economy. Because if government borrows, less is available for the firm. Also it will cause inflation because demand बढ़ जाएगी economy में. If you've written this equation in the next one, right? When the government decides to borrow in an economy, when the government decides to borrow in the economy, the firms will have less funds to borrow. The firms will have less funds to borrow. Also, the cost of borrowing will go up. Cost of borrowing will go up. This phenomena is referred to as crowding out, of private sector investment. Crowding out of private sector investment. Is this clear what is crowding out? Why we say fiscal deficit is bad? Because अगर government जितना borrow करेगी उतना ही firm के लिए less available है firm in the economy. Now, sorry. If the government is borrowing, that means G is greater than P. This means the government is borrowing करते ही crowding out हो जाएगी. The moment you borrow, you're crowding out the private sector. This is automatic. But what can the government do with this borrowed money? One type of expenditure the government can do is, government makes public goods. That is, government creates infrastructure. What else can the government do with this money? Providing subsidy. The government can provide salary to its people. The government can provide transfers. Transfers mostly, you can say subsidy or welfare. Now these are the two major expenditures which the government can do. यही government का काम है, administration run करना जिसके लिए salary चाहिए, transfers welfare के लिए, public goods, infrastructure. These are the three functions. Now which of the two functions is better for the firm? When the government creates public goods, why? Because when the government creates public goods, this is giving me an opportunity to do business. Now if there is an opportunity to do business, will the firm bring in more money? रोड नहीं था पहले, रोड बन गया, मार्केट भी मिल गई और रॉ मटेरियल भी मिल गया. Now if the government does this, there is opportunity to do business. When there is opportunity to do the business, when the government is constructing any new asset, this type of phenomena is called as crowding in. तो अगर मैंने एक्सपेंडिचर ऐसा किया जिससे बिजनेस का इंटरेस्ट बढ़ रहा है, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज क्राउडिंग इन. बट क्राउडिंग इन इज हाईली कंडीशनल. Why? First, the money has to come here. The money not here. It has to come here. This is the first condition. Second condition is this public good has to be actually that the government makes an announcement that we're going to build a road. वो road built होनी चाहिए. So that means delivery of the project has to happen. When these two factors will combine, then only there will be crowding in. Crowding out the automatic है. But crowding in is highly conditional. Depends where you are spending the money, and second, whether you are able to deliver the project or not. If the project doesn't get delivered, crowding in will not happen. So crowding in is conditional. Crowding out is automatic. In the next one, right? When the government decides to create public goods, the firm will get opportunity to create more business, therefore the investments can increase. This phenomena is referred to as crowding in. This phenomena is referred to as crowding in of private sector investments. Is this clear? In the next one, right? Though crowding out is automatic, Crowding in is highly conditional. Crowding in is conditional. Which is based on where the government spends the money, based on where the government spends the money, and if the government is actually able to deliver the asset. And if the government is actually able to deliver the asset. Is this clear? Crowding in, crowding out. How exactly this I'll relate again in fiscal policy. If the government borrows, how it is problematic for the economy. One problem is crowding out. There are other problems also. It has an impact on current account deficit. It has an impact on inflation. But what is the impact on investments overall? It's a negative impact because firms उतना ही invest नहीं कर पाएंगे जितना government borrow करेगी. So this is why whenever every year the government says this is our plan of expenditure, this is our total taxation. We see there's a gap between the two. That means we have a target of 3.5, 4% of GDP as fiscal deficit. That becomes important for the firm. They get an idea कि कितना government borrow करने वाला है. If the government borrows too much, it keeps on increasing. This is a negative sign for the firm. They'll get less money. If the government reduces its fiscal deficit, that means the government is getting more disciplined. It is better sign for the private sector कि हमें ज़्यादा पैसा मिलेगा to invest as compared to this. Both things are important for the firm. Amount what they are getting and at what cost they are getting. Both is important. Both can change when the government borrows. Is this clear? Now, what is the interaction with rest of the world? So we've discussed three factors. We have discussed household, firms, and government. Now, how does this economy interact with rest of the world? India's interaction with rest of the world happens on what grounds? Or any economy's interaction with rest of the world, how can the interaction happen? One interaction is that you can have an exchange of goods and services. This is called as trade. Exchange of goods and service, this is one. Trade involves export and import. You can note this down, easy होगा, dictate नहीं करना पड़ेगा. One interaction with the rest of the world is exchange of goods and services, that is export and import. What do you mean by export? Meaning क्या है export का? Selling goods and services to the foreign. Two things here. Production done in domestic territory, consumption done by rest of the world. Consumption done by rest of the world, either done in their own country or done in India. तो अगर कोई foreign tourist India में आके hospital में admit हो रहा है, that is also export. Because it was produced domestically but consumed by rest of the world. वो चाहे consume अपनी country में करें, चाहे वो India में आके consume करें. Rest of the world का consumption होगा, that is termed as export. So what is the meaning of export? Produced domestically but consumed by rest of the world. चाहे वो वहाँ जाके करें अपनी कंट्री में एक्सपोर्ट ऑफ गुड. सर्विस का एक्सपोर्ट हो सकता है बाहर, कई बार सर्विस का एक्सपोर्ट सेम कंट्री में भी होता है. So if a particular foreign national has come to India to watch a particular music show or a particular movie, both of them are consuming services. जो सर्विस हुई थी domestically produced but consumed by rest of the world. What is import? This is produced outside the territory but consumed import का मतलब है production outside हुआ है. It's not produced in India. It has been produced outside India and consumed domestically. If that is also export because वो citizen के ऊपर नहीं आता, residentship के ऊपर आता है. It's where the person is resident. Resident status is what determines whether the product is export or a domestic income. I'll explain this concept. GNP में वो clear हो जाएगा. Export होगा. Foreigner वो भी export है ना. This is what I'm saying. It's not depending on the citizenship status. वो resident status पे defined है. I'll tell you what is a resident. We don't use the concept of citizenship in economics, we use the concept of resident. Resident का मतलब है एक तो उस जगह का citizen होगा. For example, Indian resident in India would be Indian citizen in India is an Indian resident. Another foreign player who has stayed in India for more than 182 days and also has, for more than 1 year and also has an economic interest in that area. Both things are true, वो भी Indian resident होगा. So it's the residential status and not the citizenship status. I'll explain that when we discuss GNP. Is this clear what is export-import? What else could be the interaction with the rest of the world? Investment. Another type is financial flows. What type of financial flows you can have from outside countries? Currency में तो flow होगा, but किस लिए currency flow होगी? Currency तो flow होगी, यहाँ पे भी currency change होगा. Goods and services में एक बंदा good देगा, दूसरा currency देगा. FDI. One type of financial flow is that you can take, yes, investment from outside, foreign direct investment, foreign institutional investment. Also, Indians can invest outside. Indians are also holding land outside, are holding companies outside. What else? One type could be transfers. What type of transfers? One type of a transfer is remittance. Or these are the three type of transfers. What is the meaning of transfer? What is the? It's a unilateral payment. Transfer का हमेशा definition would remain the same. It's a unilateral payment. All the three are unilateral. Anything else? Financial flow, which you can have. You can have investment. You can have transfers. Anything else? What else? And that is also financial. Yes, borrowing or loans. You take loans from outside, you also can give loans outside. This is how you interact. Any other exchange with the rest of the world? One is exchange of goods and services, other is financial. What else exchange happens? Think. Services कैसे? The third and the most important, going outside, direct people to people exchanges, people leaving the country. That is what? Immigration and emigration. Immigration exit, immigration entry. These are the three ways to interact with the rest of the world. Now, when is an economy said to be a closed economy? When is the economy said to be a closed economy? When these three particular exchanges are restricted. That means the economy is closed economy. See, completely closed नहीं हो सकता बिल्कुल भी. There would be higher amount of restrictions. For example, when we say India from 1947 to 91, we were a closed economy, not because we did not have any of these exchanges. These exchanges were present, but these exchanges were highly restricted or limited. When these restrictions are, that is called as an open economy. तीन टाइप के exchange हो सकते हैं: goods and services, financial flows, and people-to-people contacts, people-to-people exchange. Mixed economy was dependent on? No, not closed or open. Mixed economy का मतलब है कि production और consumption कौन decide कर रहा है, whether government or market. We said both will decide. Some things government, something market. This was called as mixed economy. वो socialist, capitalist mixed economy है. Closed or open is depending on these transactions only. So when we decided that we'll be a closed economy, restricted flow है. Zero flow नहीं हो सकता, because no economy can work as completely that. And when we have restricted flow, closed economy, or any policies which are promoting closed economy, this is called as autarky. Autarkic policies means protectionism or closed economy. Open economy is globalized. Protectionist, global. Is this clear how the transactions happen? Now how in our circle of flow these will be related? Are all these terms clear? Now how will the four sector economy be placed? We have the firm, we have the households, we have rest of the world. Now how will the households be related to rest of the world? वो तो फिर हम यहीं के यहीं चले जाएंगे ना. Import consumption. From outside, I can bring in imports. I can buy goods and services. For that, I will have to make payments of imports. How else can the household be related? Remittances. That is one-sided flow. उसका circle नहीं बनेगा. क्या है remittances? I'll just explain. Employment. The households could be providing, and in return for labor, they are going to be paid compensation. From India, you can work for a company which is outside India. You can provide them labor, and in return, you'll get compensation. This is how the households are related. How will the firm be related? We are not drawing remittances because remittances are one-side flow. वहाँ मैंने tax के साथ फिर भी बना दिया because tax के साथ दोनों unilateral थे. Here remittances is one side. I'll just explain what is remittances. Firm, the rest of the world might be giving them imports, basics ones first. Imports, they will pay them payments. Similarly, the firm might be selling goods to them, that is exports. In return, they will be getting export payments. Other also can be financial flows. Financial flows could be firm investing outside, firm taking investment. Firms giving loans, firms taking loans. That can also be included. You can make this diagram. The four sector economy. I hope the movement is clear. Labor कैसे? Outside definitely can happen. वो वहाँ पे I can take labor from rest of the world and pay them compensation. Definitely. If you know the basic idea, ये basic idea बताने के लिए क्या interaction है? You can add investment, you can add everything here. Investment, loan flow, everything. This is why I first gave you the detailed version. ऐसे rest of the world का government से भी आएगा. Government भी import करती है. Government rest of the world customs duty and number of taxes also they can levy on them. Okay, whatever imports come in, duty also. It's just a simplified version I've told you extensively. This is why I told you the three types of exchanges. It's just a representative format of 2-3 things only, not exhaustive. Now, what are remittances and how are remittances different from compensation? What are remittances? India is the largest receiver of remittances in the world. What are remittances? Is this, have you drawn this? Yes, remittance is a type of transfer. Is this done? Now what are remittances? We have the firm and we have a household in US. Similarly, we have the firm and household in India. Some of the people from here have gone here and have become households of US. People to people exchange, someone from this household has gone out there. He provides his labor to a firm, and in return, what do they get? Compensation. This compensation, or whatever they have received in exchange of factors of production, this is called as factor income. This is what we discussed yesterday. Factors of production के exchange में you get income to the factors of production. Income to the factors of production is called as factor income. Now what this household is doing, one part of the compensation he's got, one part of the compensation he's delivering in the household without taking anything in return. He receives some salary. One part of the salary he is giving to the household in India. This household in India, whatever he is giving is called as remittance. And remittance is an example of transfer payment. It is not an example of factor income. ये ट्रांसफर पेमेंट है, why? Because this is unilateral. Similarly, this happens in domestic economy also. A person has gone to find work in some other city. One part of his salary he is giving to the household back without taking anything in return. This is the meaning of remittance. This is how remittance is different from salary, is different from compensation. Compensation जो मिला है यहाँ पे, ये यूएस की जीडीपी में काउंट होगा. जहाँ जो compensation मिला है वो इंडिया की जीडीपी में काउंट होगा. ट्रांसफर किसी की भी जीडीपी में काउंट नहीं होंगे. Transfer, why I am creating this difference? Because compensation or factor payments are included, transfer payments are not included. Is this clear? What are transfers and what is this? Now, for this four sector, if you want to make a diagram, you can make this one to make clear कि remittances अलग क्यों हैं, because remittances are not included in GDP. क्यों? Payment receive हो रही है, so the thing is, what is included in GDP और GNP? Produce. तो produce हुआ तो वो production पे income आनी चाहिए ना. ये तो transfer है. So if $100 was received here, I sent $20 here, right? तो ये 100 तो count होगा ना GDP में. तो ये अलग से 20 क्यों count करूँगा मैं इंडिया में? 100 will be counted in US GDP, not in India's. So it's, why will I count 20 separately? This is what is the difference between factor payment and transfer payments. Factor to count hoga because production में use हुआ है. Transfer will not be counted. Any type of transfer will not be counted. Only one type of transfer will be counted, that is subsidy, because subsidy aided in production. I'll discuss the difference. Is this clear? Now, if this is the particular case, these four sectors, this is how the whole economy works. Now, if I want to calculate the output of this economy, how will I calculate the output? If this four sector economy, I have to calculate the output. How can I calculate the output? Output can be calculated by measuring the expenditure, income or production. So if we fix to the expenditure, who all are making expenditure in this economy? Expenditure done by the households, that is called as consumption. Who else is making expenditure? Government, this is called as the government expenditure. Anything else? Firm is making investment. Though सिर्फ investment firm नहीं, government और household भी कर रहे हैं, but I'll explain this in detail in GDP only. सिर्फ आय firm नहीं करता, government भी करती है investment public goods में, household भी जब घर बनाते हैं वो भी आय में count होगा. I'll explain this in GDP. Just for simplistic explanation, I'm giving you this. Doesn't mean कि I means only firms. I also includes government and households. Who else? Who else is making expenditure now? ये तीनों तो domestic में भी थे. Rest of the world, what is the expenditure done by rest of the world in India? Investment. Is loan part of output? Output means what? Anything that is produced. किसी ने produce किया है तो किसी ने खर्चा किया है. खर्चा किसने किया? Household, government and firms. Who else has spent money on the goods produced? The rest of the world. What is the rest of the world expenditure done on Indian goods and services? That is called as, is it a tax? Is tax included in production? Output measurement का क्या मतलब हुआ? Something is produced, someone would have spent money. Something is produced, someone would have received. Either count this or count this, all three would be same. If you remember yesterday's class, I told you if production happens, someone would have spent money and someone would have got received money on production. तो या तो production count करो या income count करो या expenditure. तीनों से you'll get the same value. If you get the same value, I'm counting expenditure. Expenditure done by rest of the world on goods produced in India. What is it called? Yes, rest of the world has done. This is what is called as the export. What is export payments? Payments received for goods and services produced in India but sold in rest of the world. Whether they are selling, coming to India or we are giving them outside. But वो produce कहाँ हुए हैं? India में. तो हमने अब India की production count कर रहे हैं, right? Now, what do we do of the imports? Why? So why should I subtract it? From where should I subtract it? Why? x से क्यों माइनस करूंगा मैं? So where did I include that in this equation? किसी चीज को माइनस करने के लिए पहले उसे ऐड भी तो किया होगा. Where was that added? When the household spent this consumption money was done on both types of goods. This was done on goods which are produced in India. This was also done on goods which are imports. Similarly, government ने जो buy किया, it bought goods from India and it bought imports. Similarly, firms also did the same. जब ये तीनों component मैंने add किए, I could not differentiate between what they spent on domestic goods and what they spent on imports. It's very difficult to calculate. So what I did was, what would be the total imports in my country would be bought by these three only. There's no other fourth player. So separately I cannot remove the imports. Why not I remove the total imports? वो I तो C, G और I में ही होंगे, तो मैं totally imports minus कर लूँ. So all those three imports component would be subtracted. That means I will get how much is the produced item. This is what is called as the import payments. So this equation, to measure the output, you can write down this equation. To measure the output, we measure the expenditure. Measuring the expenditure, this becomes x minus m is called as, this term is called as is it clear why minus m? This is called as net exports. This term is consumption expenditure. This term is investment expenditure. This is government expenditure, and this term is called as net exports. This is the total output produced in any economy. This equation comes in very handy to solve a lot of questions. But you should know the meaning behind it, कि कैसे add हुआ है. Expenditure method is also the same. Is this clear how the total economy interacts with outside? How the total economy works? What the household does, what the firm does, what the government does, and how the interaction of all three with the rest of the world. Basic meanings of all the terms. Is this clear? Now next is what? What previous equation? नहीं, उसमें एक्टर कम थे ना. प्रीवियस इक्वेशन वाज ओनली c प्लस आई प्लस जी, देयर वाज नो इंटरेक्शन. उससे पहले सिर्फ दो ही लोग थे, तब उसमें सिर्फ c प्लस आई था, सिर्फ इसमें c प्लस आई प्लस जी बना. अब ये टोटल इकोनॉमी हो गई. ये दिस बिकॉज इट्स इंक्लूडिंग एवरीवन. पिछले वाले में तो आउटसाइड इंटरेक्शन नहीं था, उससे पहले गवर्नमेंट नहीं था. व्हाट आई डिड थ्रू दीज थ्री डिफरेंट मॉडल्स वाज जस्ट टू एक्सप्लेन यू कि किसका क्या रोल है इकोनॉमी में. तो वो टर्म समझ आई, बट फाइनल इकोनॉमी तो ये बनेगी. दिस इज द फाइनल इकोनॉमी. इज इट क्लियर व्हाट इज द रोल फ्रॉम द सर्कुलर मॉडल? नाउ द नेक्स्ट इज व्हाट इज जीडीपी देन. आई नो that resources have to be converted into goods and services. How this production is happening, what is the role of production, what is the role of consumption, household, government, firms, and rest of the world is what we have discussed. Now what is the total goods and services produced? This is called as output. Now how do we measure this output? How do we measure this output? Estimation technique is 3. But what is the variable to use this measure this output? That measurement variable is called as GDP. From where does this term GDP comes in? कहीं से तो आया होगा. It's not something which is real. It's something which is a fictional entity, created entity, and that created entity has been given a meaning. This meaning is evolving over a period of time. क्योंकि जब नई चीज़ें डेवलप हो रही हैं तो वो इंक्लूड होंगी नहीं होंगी ये भी डिसाइड करना है, राइट? एंड इट शुड बी अ कॉमन मार्कर. Why it should be common marker? Why do you need to compare? अगर आपका 8% है, यूएस का 6% है, तो आपको क्या मिला कंपैरिजन से? चलो एक बन गया फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग भी, उससे कोई मेडल तो नहीं मिला है, फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग है चाहे नहीं है. अदरवाइज ऑल्सो फ्रॉम वेयर डिड दिस कम इन? डेफिनेटली वन ऑफ द बेनिफिट्स इज अगर कॉमन मार्कर होगा तो कंपेयर कर सकते हो. डजंट मीन का कंपैरिजन करना है इसलिए कॉमन मार्कर लेके आए. देयर इज अ होल स्टोरी बिहाइंड हाउ दिस कॉमन मार्कर केम इन. सो फ्रॉम वेयर डज दिस कम? नोबडी इज एन आइडिया. कहीं तो कुछ होगा कि जीडीपी एकदम से कैसे आ गई. Did US tell how the GDP has to be calculated? See, this problem started during World War II, when a lot of allies were spending money for the defense efforts. Now US wanted to know how much is Britain spending, or how much France is spending, or how much Germany is spending. You cannot know how much they are spending until and unless you know what is their total output. तो मुझे कैसे पता चलेगा कि डिफेंस पे they have spent 20% when I don't know what is the total output they have produced. This was the first reason why the country started asking for a common measurement of output. Till World War II, every country was measuring its own output using different techniques. कोई कुछ चीज़ ऐड कर रहा है, कोई कुछ नहीं कर रहा है, सबका technique is different. 1939, countries want to know how much defense expenditure they are doing, especially the allies. The allies want to know how much each of their partner is spending its effort in defense. कि अगर goods 4 produce हुए हैं, कितने defense produce हुए हैं, तो वो 4 का भी मेरे को पहले estimate चाहिए. सबका सेम एस्टिमेट होगा तभी मुझे आई विल गेट टू नो हाउ मच इज द डिफेंस एक्सपेंडिचर दे आर डूइंग. द सेकंड थिंग दैट हैपेंड इज वंस द वर्ल्ड वॉर एंडेड, द कोल्ड वॉर बिगैन. If Cold War has started, people want to know which economy is performing better, whether it is the US economy or the USSR economy, because the Cold War was spreading their own ideologies of production. US is saying use the production method of market. USSR is saying use the production method of state. Capitalism versus socialism, blue versus red. Now, how will the countries decide if they don't know what the total output they are producing? They don't know if whatever countries are using market, what exactly is their development. Finally, when we saying government also has a role in the economy. If government has a role in the economy, if the government taxes more or the government spends more, and what is their impact on the output, how would I know that if I don't know what is the total output? Till 1929, government was never seen a player in the economy. Macroeconomics पूरा subject ही 1929 में John Maynard Keynes is one who gave birth to this idea that whenever there is a slowdown, government expenditure आपको बाहर ला सकता है. That means government has to become a major player. If government has to become a major player, what policy should the government use? Should it use its taxation policy or should it use its expenditure policy? Taxation का क्या impact होगा output पे? Expenditure का क्या होगा impact output पे? For calculating all of this, first I need to know what is the total output. I cannot develop any policy until and unless I have a common measurement of output. So no theory can develop what should be done in what particular case if I don't have a common measurement of output. So all of these techniques, all of these reasons became the reasons for adopting a common measurement of output. And this common measurement of output came from the United Nations. United Nations, what they did is they brought economists from different nations and developed a system which is called as System of National Accounts. This is called as SNA. This System of National Accounts presents the guidelines and the methodologies for measurement of total output. And for measurement of output, they defined a term that was called as the gross domestic product. Now, what should be included and what not to be included, what is the definition? Everything is decided by this System of National Accounts. There's not a lot of reasoning behind it, what is happening and why it is not happening, though they try to explain the reason also, but not every particular concept which they are giving under GDP has a logical reason. Some things which should be included are not included. Why? Because it is a decision of the System of National Accounts. The System of National Accounts came for the first time in 1947. And from time to time, this has been revised so that whatever new production activity happens, usko estimate kaise karna hai, this is what the System of National Accounts, the SNA tells. The latest edition of SNA is something which came in 2007. This is what India has also adopted. Most of the countries have adopted this SNA, and from this SNA we have the concept of GDP. Now what is the meaning of GDP? Definition and what will be included and what not be included is all given by the system of national accounts itself. So rules बनाए हैं global body ने, and everyone is following the rules. Whether the rules are logical or not, that can be questioned. But definitely you have to follow these rules. That is why you can compare the countries on a common marker. Started is something which from the World War II I told you how there was a need for a common measurement technique. That common measurement technique for output became gross domestic product. So you can write this. The United Nations System of National Accounts, the UNSNA, provides a common set of guidelines and methodologies to estimate the output of a nation, These guidelines have been revised from time to time. To accommodate the changes happening in production, have been revised from time to time to accommodate the changes in production. The latest set of guidelines was issued in 2007. The latest set of guidelines was introduced in 2007. The common metric to measure output is gross domestic product, which is defined as market value or monetary value of all final goods and services, market value or monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a domestic territory in a specific period of time. Market value or monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a domestic territory in a specific period of time. Is it clear from where exactly the motivation is coming and who is actually defining what is GDP? Now what is the meaning of all? I'll explain the meaning of all of these phrases, but we'll discuss it after a break of 10 to 15 minutes. I hope the role of all actors and everything is clear. Any problem you face in the pace of the class, you just let me know. I'll explain the definition of GDP, all of these different terms after a break. Is GDP clear? From where this concept has come and what is GDP? Now what is the meaning of GDP in the different phrases? The first term says market value. Market value or monetary value. What do we mean by this? Now with GDP, what are we measuring? This particular concept is for measurement of output. Now when we are saying we are measuring output, this output is measured in terms of what? Are we counting the total goods and services produced, or are we counting the number multiplied by its price? Output is not measured in terms of quantity. Output is measured in the terms of value, and this value is expressed in the terms of money. So when we are measuring the total goods and services, these goods and services or the output is not measured in terms of quantity of goods, it is measured in terms of what exactly is the money value. Now this money value is best captured where? For any particular product chain, any particular product which is being produced, first is where exactly the product is produced. This is the production side. From the production side, there is a wholesale level. Then you have retail, which finally reaches the consumer. Now, where exactly should I measure this money value? Should I measure this money value at the production side? Should I measure it at the wholesale level, or should I measure it at the retail level? This retail to consumer is what we are calling as the market. Now, at what level should it be measured? First, हम quantity measure नहीं कर रहे. What we are measuring is quantity into price. Quantity is produced, price is the value, money value of this. At what level should it be done? Should it be done here? Should it be done, or should it be done here? 1, 2 or 3? Why production? So should that not be included? प्रोडक्ट का जो वैल्यू आ रहा है इन्फ्लेशन से अगर बढ़ रहा है प्राइस, वो क्वालिटी की वजह से ही बढ़ सकता है. आई वॉन्ट टू नो वट इज द टोटल आउटपुट प्रोड्यूस्ड. सो टोटल आउटपुट प्रोड्यूस्ड, यू आर सेइंग प्रोडक्शन में टैक्सेस एंड दैट विल नॉट बी इंक्लूडेड. सो वो मार्केट वैल्यू से आई कैन एडजस्ट फॉर रीचिंग दिस वैल्यू ऑल्सो. दैट कैन ऑल्सो हैपन. बट वट इज द बेनिफिट ऑफ डूइंग इट हेयर एंड नॉट डूइंग इट हेयर? एनीथिंग एल्स यू कैन थिंक ऑफ? इसका भी I will address separately. Both taxes and inflation I'll address separately. See, when I measure it at 1 or measure it at 2, I'm missing out on the 2 services which have been created outside production. When it goes from production to wholesale, this is a service created. From wholesale to retail, this is also a service created. So when I measure the production, I will not be estimating the total output which has been produced, because I'll be neglecting 1 and 2 services. But the moment I do it in the market, it will count all the goods and services that are produced. This is why GDP measures the monetary value, and this monetary value is measured in the market. That means whatever interaction is taking place between the retailer and the consumer, that is all bilateral exchanges. Bilateral exchanges means the retailer is selling it to the consumer, consumer is paying the money. So either I count this or I count what exactly the goods or services is being sold, both will give me the same value. So I am calculating in GDP a money value of goods and services produced by checking its exchange in the market. So GDP is always calculated in the market and is a market value or a monetary value. What do we mean by monetary value? There will always be in numbers of rupees. It could be rupees or it could be in dollars. So GDP हमेशा monetary value है. Quantity नहीं होगी कि 5 tables, 10 chair, 5 laptop ऐसे बना है. इन तीनों की money value add होके I'll get a singular value of what exactly is being produced in terms of money value. Is this clear? Now when we say bilateral exchanges in the market, there are some type of unilateral exchanges also happening. Unilateral transfers, it's not an exchange. Unilateral transfer, for example, you have the payment of, what is unilateral? The government is paying certain welfare payments. There are certain remittances which are being received within the country. What else? What else are transfers which are unilateral? Transfers, so your welfare, remittances, what else apart from transfers? There is subsidy. Anything else? Grant, aid, gifts and donations. All of these are unilateral. Should they be included in GDP? Apart from subsidy, none of these flows are adding to the final production of goods and services. Since subsidy is only one transfer payment which is aiding the production, since it is aiding the production, subsidy is included in GDP, rest of the unilateral payments are not included. So all bilateral exchanges in the market will be included, and unilateral payments, only subsidy will be included, none of the unilateral payments would be included. Another thing, there might be certain goods which are sold in the market. There are also goods which are produced, but these goods are produced for self-consumption. And this would happen mostly in the case of primary goods. Primary goods, for example, agriculture. So if someone is producing food in its own home and consuming that food, it's not going to the market. Should these type of goods which are produced for own consumption, should they be included? No. Why? What is the definition of GDP? If no, why? Yes, why? GDP is saying money value, and since market, it is easy to collect the data and also collecting all goods and services. But if, some good is being produced but not bought to the market, is the production not happening? Are we not producing? Also, can I calculate a market value for this good? How? If I'm producing 5 kg of rice, that rice has a market value. तो वो calculate करना आसान है. This is what is called as imputation of value. I don't know what the real value is, but I can impute a value के market में 5 किलो इतने का है तो मैंने इतने का बनाया है. That means something is produced, resource is being converted. This is part of output. Just because it is not reaching the market doesn't mean it should not be included. Any good which has been produced for self-consumption or own consumption, they form part of GDP. Similarly, services can be produced for own consumption. Services produced for self-consumption. What could be these services? Services for self-consumption. Constructing own house, वो भी एक service है, right? Anything else? ये करना थोड़ा मुश्किल है. लोग अपना घर कैसे बनाएंगे? इतना आसान है नहीं घर बनाना. घर बनवाना आसान नहीं है, बनाना तो फिर बहुत दूर की बात है. What could be service for own consumption? कैसे? How is it that service? अच्छा, मतलब घर वाले प्ले कर रहे हैं. इंडो थिएटर यही हो गया ना कि घर वाले सिनेमा, बट दैट इज हाउ इज दैट अ सर्विस? वो तो आपने गुड खरीदा है और गुड से आपको कोई सर्विस थोड़ी मिल रही है. व्हाट इज सर्विस? सर्विस इज एन इंटेंजिबल थिंग. टीचर इज टीचिंग, सो इफ समवन इज टीचिंग इन योर होम, right? Self consumption, mother is teaching the children, that is service. Mother is cooking, that is also service. Any household or any care economy work, cleaning the dishes, cleaning the house, that is all a service. Should that be included? Why? UPSC का 15 mark question आया last year mains में ये. Care economy should be monetized or not, and if how do we monetize it through women empowerment? Should it be included? I'm asking should. है include नहीं हो रहा, वो अलग आंसर है. Should it be included? Why no? Services for own consumption भी production है. Why it should not be included? It should be included, but technically it is not. It is not included. The reason given behind this is it's difficult to estimate, but this reason has absolutely no logic. It can be imputed just like goods only. It's just that who is deciding the rules can decide how it should happen. So you can write down money value or monetary value means money value. You have a doubt? ऐसा यही तो बोला मैंने, SNA ने रूल बना दिया. हर रूल का लॉजिक नहीं है. You can still have to agree to what exactly they are saying. I can give you an answer to this also. SNA के decision making कहाँ पे, कौन बना रहा है rules? Who exactly is part of this committee who is making this? It's a male dominated society, most of the males are doing it. And who produces this service for own consumption? It's female. तो जैसे ही आपने उसके काम को वैल्यू दे दिया, सोसाइटी में वैल्यू बढ़ जाएगी. अभी तो आप उसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बोल के उसको कुछ भी करवा सकते हो कि दिस इज योर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी एंड इट्स नॉट अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क. अ वेरी सिंपल आइडिया. घर पे खाना कौन बनाता मोस्टली? फीमेल्स. बाहर शेफ कौन है? कैसे हो गया ये? इतना अच्छा ही कुक था, घर पे क्यों नहीं बना रहा है? मॉनेटरी वैल्यू नहीं है ना उसकी, जीडीपी में वो ऐड नहीं हो रहा. सो यू कैन जस्ट से दिस इज योर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, बट दिस इज अ पेड वर्क विच आई शुड डू. सो मोस्ट ऑफ योर केयर इकोनॉमी विट इज child rearing or cleaning the house or cooking, all of these are again skilled activities. ये unskilled नहीं है, but you can give them as a responsibility and not treat them as valuable. Don't give them a monetary value. So this is how decision making starts from the top. You have more inclusion of women, this should be the first thing that should be included. UPSC asked this last year, this itself, that what is the difference between care economy and monetized economy. Monetized economy is where we are giving a market value to the product. Care economy is something which is seen as a responsibility, does not have a market value. Though it has a market value, but we are not assigning the value to it, because आप घर का कोई भी काम लो, उस वो मार्केट में आप you can buy it, whether it is cooking, cleaning, child rearing, सबका एक market price है, but we are not assigning any value to that. Second part of the question is, how can this care economy be monetized through women empowerment? This is what do you mean by moral value? यही moral value का तो obligation है कि वो the woman who is not working at home, वो बाहर जब जा रही है ना, तो वो अपने गिल्ट के साथ जा रही है कि मैं घर का काम छोड़ के जा रही हूँ, तो उसको वो गिल्ट बैठा दिया है कि ये moral value is your responsibility. So, but is the father not responsible for that connectivity? Father की भी तो responsibility होगी ना connectivity के, सिर्फ mother की है. And if the mother is doing, this is what is the dual burden on the women in the household. 1 month back, the Hindu carried out this article. They said that Indian women are the ones which are working the most outside homes. And not just that, next day they gave a data point कि वो बाहर ही ज़्यादा काम नहीं कर रही comparing to the global peers. So if a woman in Europe is working for 6 hours, this is the amount they're getting. Same पैसे के लिए women in India has to work 10 or 12 hours. So Indian women are working more in the private domain, of the outside domain, public domain. But घर पे भी double burden है क्योंकि सारा काम उनका ही है. Now you are saying responsibility या moral value degrade हो जाएगी. तो father की responsibility क्या है? Should the if any particular societal scenario is based on exploitation of one gender, do you think that is acceptable? Is it a choice? Is it a choice? You are saying कि हमारा family system ऐसा है तो ये करना ही पड़ेगा. Is that a choice given to that particular gender? What are you saying कि moral value क्या dilute होगी? The situation you are saying कि mother should cook or mother is cooking. Why do you see only mother cooking? नहीं फादर इज गोइंग आउटसाइड. ये आपके दिमाग में पिक्चर बनी कैसे कि फादर इज गोइंग आउटसाइड एंड मदर इज कुकिंग? फ्रॉम वेयर डिड यू गेट दिस आइडिया? नाउ अब हु शुड बियर द बर्डन ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंकिंग? अब उस फीमेल के ऊपर बर्डन आ रहा है ना, उसका चॉइस थोड़ी है. If you give her a choice, you give her equal education and you give her the equal opportunity, do you think the woman would decide to cook at home? Do you think? And if it is, it should be a personal decision. Okay, I want to take this. But do you think they have a choice? This is how the society should be? Then what are you defending? Any particular relationship is based on exploitation of one over the other is not a healthy relationship, right? Now you are saying कि ये हमारा society का custom है. So it's a good thing we are moving in a direction of positive reform. If we include this, that means you can tell them this is not your responsibility. And even it is not, what is the responsibility of the father? बैठ के बस क्रिकेट और पॉलिटिक्स की बातें करनी है. दिस इज द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द फादर. Yes, so the vice versa, but do the women have a choice? Simple example, Rohit Sharma recently became a father. He is playing cricket and where is the wife? Why is he not taking care of his child? वो क्रिकेट क्यों खेलने आया? Within say 5 days or 6 days. Even if Virat Kohli took a parental leave for 2 months, he's the one who's playing. What is the wife doing? In that particular case, the wife might have taken a choice because उनके पास पैसा बहुत है, right? But do you think whatever is happening, is it happening on an equal basis? तो अब responsibility या moral choice या इंडिया में ऐसा custom है जो भी है, you can't say कि it will be a problem. Equality आपने exploitation पे उसको sustain किया ना. If it is equal, let it be a responsibility of both. You tell me in child rearing, apart from feeding the child, what is something which the father cannot do? Apart from feeding. Yes, बिल्कुल. वो pump mill से हो सकता है, बिल्कुल. Bottle से father कर सकता है. Why? It's practical. People do that. Women all the time do that. How can it not be done? This is very practical. अगर मेरा घर में 10,000 फादर कमा रहा है, मेरे ये 10,000 इनकम है, तो हमारा घर ही नहीं चलेगा ना. अगर घर पे 10,000 पे बैठ जाऊं, It's all happening. It's not very. It's just that you've not seen it doesn't mean it's not possible. और वो possible नहीं है तभी तो exploitation है. This is what I said. What is natural? इसमें natural क्या है? Feeding के अलावा tell me one thing which the father cannot do. Even if it is not the economics, it's difficult for you to think, but it's not because the whole relationship is based on exploitation of one over the other. इतना exploitation है कि आप count भी नहीं कर रहे because majority of the services produced for own consumption are done by women. If you see, there's absolutely no logic behind it. Market value or monetary value means, write down. बड़े मजे आ रहे हैं डिस्कशन में. करण जौहर का एग्जाम्पल है, बिल्कुल सही एग्जाम्पल है. इट्स नॉट अ बैड एग्जाम्पल. There are people with single fathers and they are taking the responsibility. ये जरूरी थोड़ी है मदर को बांध दो बच्चे के साथ. यही होता है. See, being a father is or having a responsibility to the child is always a choice to the father. वो तो 5 मिनट आएगा, उसे खिला के चला जाएगा, जैसे ही रोने लगेगा फेंक देगा मदर के पास कि भाई संभाल. He has to go for a job. Is he prime minister? Who is he? हाँ तो वो exactly this does not happen. तो ये सेम हो नहीं रहा है ना. ऐसा होता है क्या रोने के फादर के पास है मदर के पास नहीं है? Why is she not in a condition? हाँ तो that is what, that's temporary. That's 2 months. Maternity 2 months, 3 months. That's it. So वही तभी तो if she is weak, that means she needs more support. Doesn't mean less support. Is the support coming from the father? Okay. Money value or monetary value means, society की class होती है, I would have given you a number of answers. Or even in ethics. Money value or monetary value means the market, the price value of the output is calculated which means all the bilateral exchanges happening in the market, of final goods and services, is counted in the next one, right? Unilateral transfers are not included. The only exception being subsidies. Next, goods produced for own consumption are included. And services produced for own consumption are not included. Services produced for own consumption are not included. Is the meaning clear? Monetary value or money value कि हमेशा एक market price होगा, monetary price होगा. Is it clear what exactly is included and not included? Services for self-consumption are not. Now next is final goods. What do we mean by final goods? Any particular goods can be classified as consumer goods and capital goods. You can make this distinction. Dictation बच जाएगा. Consumer goods and capital goods. Consumer goods are what goods? What would be the meaning? This is for just cancel out capital. This is not capital, this is producer. Cancel out capital. Producer is used in production. It's not capital, it's producer. नहीं बोल सकते क्योंकि कैपिटल के अलावा भी यूज होते हैं प्रोड्यूसर गुड्स. जस्ट एक्सप्लेन. कंज्यूमर गुड्स कैन बी ऑफ टू टाइप्स. वन इज ड्यूरेबल एंड द अदर इज नॉन ड्यूरेबल. What is the difference? Durable goods are those which can be used multiple times. Non-durables are those used only once. And even when we say multiple times in India, we say the durable has a life cycle of 3 years. Similarly, producer can also be durable, which can be used multiple times, and non-durables, which can be used only once. What could be producer durables? Machines. So what are those goods which are used in production but not consumed within the process? What is it called? Intermediate, which are used in the process and not consumed. Used in the process and not consumed are called as, remember yesterday I told you capital goods. Used in production but not consumed. Machines, tools, equipments, infrastructure, सब capital है. Non-durable, which is used but gets consumed. तभी वो used once होगा. What type of goods? This could be the raw material or intermediate goods. Now, out of the total 4, which of them are final and which are not? Out of the total 4, which are final and which are not final? Final good means something which can be used, cannot be reprocessed or reused further. Reprocessing nahi ho sakti, that is what is a final good. Out of the total 4, which are final goods? All of these 3 are final. Whenever they are produced, they cannot be reprocessed further, whether it is a machine or durable or non-durable. Consumer का तो सीधा ही consumption. Capital goods is also, whenever capital good is produced, it is a final good. Whenever machines, tools, equipments will be produced, these are final. These are not final because they are converted into this. या तो वो consumer बनाएंगे capital. So you can write down final goods are those which cannot be reprocessed further. Why we are not including raw material and intermediate good? Final ये 3 है बस. And we include in GDP all final goods and services. We are not talking about intermediate. This is not included. Why this is not included? Have you noted this down? I'll just explain in a short example. If a farmer is delivering cotton, the cotton is being converted into fabric, the fabric is being converted into shirt. Out of the 3, which is final? Shirt. तो shirt में इन दोनों की value already included है. Cotton and fabric both have been included in the value of shirt. This is why these 2 materials are not final. This is something which is final. So we include only final goods because final goods will always have the value of the raw and intermediate. So GDP is money value of all final goods. What are final goods? Whenever an economy will produce any consumer or capital good, या consumer good produce होगा या capital good produce होगा, only these will be counted. Raw material and intermediate goods will not be counted. Why? Because this raw material and intermediate goods are part of the final consumption. Is this clear? Now if we say, just to give a clarification on what type of a good, if we say salt, is this a final good or is a intermediate material? How? Depending on who uses it, we will classify it as a final or a intermediate material. If it is used by a household or it is used by a restaurant, when it is used by baker it becomes intermediate, when it is used by household it becomes final. So the final and intermediate depends on who is using it. If it is done by the household, it is a consumer good. If it is done by a firm for further production, it is a intermediate material. So it depends on who is using, we will define a final or an intermediate material. Is this clear? So the first phrase was saying market value, monetary value. What is included is clear. The second is saying all final goods and services. What are final goods and services? It includes consumer goods and capital goods. Is this clear? Now, next phrase is saying produced domestically, or produced in a territory. That means when we say GDP is market value or monetary value of all final goods and services which are produced in a domestic territory. Now, what do we mean by domestic territory? When we say output measurement, we are saying output measurement should be defined in a particular territory. GDP therefore measures the output of a particular nation's boundary. It is not talking about any particular who is producing, it is talking about where it is being produced. So the question which GDP answers that you are measuring output production. First, output production of what? Output production of final goods and services, and what exactly of this? We are calculating the market value of this. But where exactly it is being produced is what GDP answers. It does not answer who's producing. That means any particular territory, when we say domestic territory, how much of the production is happening in India? So that means GDP is a where concept, where it is being produced. GDP of India, GDP of US, GDP of China. So we are talking about the domestic territory. Now when we say domestic territory, what do we mean by domestic territory? According to the SNA, the domestic territory has 4 meanings. First, you can write down this. GDP measures the output. GDP measures the output of the domestic territory where the domestic territory includes first the political boundary, that is the land and sea boundary, second, Indian embassies, consulates, consulate office, military bases, or any scientific base in rest of the world. Third, aircrafts or ships operated by Indian companies in rest of the world. Aircrafts or ships operated by Indian companies in rest of the world. And finally, fourth, natural gas and oil rigs operated by Indian companies in rest of the world. Is this clear? What is the meaning of GDP? GDP measures output of a domestic territory. What is meaning of domestic territory? First is the political boundary. The land boundary आपके political boundary है, and also the sea boundary, that is 12 nautical miles from the coast. This 12 nautical miles from the coast is what is your total political boundary. यहाँ पे कुछ भी production होगा, that is irrespective of who does it. Whether it is done by foreign national, done by Indian national, it will all be part of India's GDP. So we are not talking about who is doing it, we are talking about where it is being done. Second is Indian embassies. Now the reason why these three are included, in nature of activity is such that you cannot have an Indian embassy within India. Nature of activity is such that you will have to have these operations outside India. So when we say aircraft shift operated, if Indigo is operating a flight between Paris and New York, that particular is added in GDP of Paris, added in GDP of New York और added in GDP of India. अब वो एयरक्राफ्ट का ऑपरेशन ही ऐसा है कि वो सिर्फ डोमेस्टिक टेरिटरी फ्लाई नहीं कर सकता. एयरपोर्ट का ऑपरेशन ही ऐसा है दैट इट हैज़ टू फ्लाई एवरीवेयर अराउंड. सो इफ दैट एयरक्राफ्ट इज बीइंग ऑपरेटेड बाय इंडियन कंपनी, then it will be added in Indian GDP. Similarly, if any particular Indian company operating a ship in international waters, that will be part of India's GDP. Also, if natural gas or oil rigs, we have got a particular natural gas or an oil rig in Russia operated by an Indian company, that will also be part of India's GDP. Simultaneously, if there are outside US embassy in India, that is not Indian territory for GDP purpose, that is US territory. US aircraft company or US ships operating within domestic territory of India are not part of India's GDP, they will be part of their own GDP. All the three different countries operating within India's boundary would be their GDP, not our GDP. So when we say GDP, GDP is a territorial concept. Territorial concept means it is answering the question where it is produced, it is not answering the question who is producing. Who का concept नहीं है, irrespective. इस territory में, when we say these 4 territories, irrespective. So this is the territory where the meaning is, in this territory, whether it is the citizen of India or it is the non-citizen, all are producing will be counted in India's GDP. Who का answer नहीं है, where का answer है. Similar concept we use is called as the concept of gross state domestic product. When we say gross state domestic product, we are saying GDP, gross state domestic product of Maharashtra, of Haryana, of Tamil Nadu. That means the territory, not who is producing, but what the territory is producing, how much it is producing. GDP is a territorial concept. Is this clear? You can write in one line here. GDP is a territorial concept. Is a territorial concept. That means it measures the output in a territory, measures the output in a territory, irrespective of who is producing. Is this clear? Market value of all final goods and services produced in a domestic territory. Are the meanings clear of the terms? Now the next term is saying produced in a specific time period. Now what do we mean by specific time period? What is the meaning of specific time period? Any particular variable can be of 2 types. One, it could be a flow variable, another, it could be a stock variable. Now, what is the difference between flow and stock? Whenever a variable is measured using the concept of time, that means it has a starting point and it has a end point. That particular variable is called as a flow variable. So any variable that is measured using the concept of time, having a start time and an end time, this would be called as a flow variable. But if any variable is measured only in a point in time, it does not have a start and end time, just one point in time, I want to know what the variable is, that is called as a stock variable. For example, whatever the income is of an individual, income will always be specific to a time period. Income of when? Income of 1 month, income of 1 day, income of 1 year. That means I will always have a start and an end point. But if I talk about what exactly is the wealth of the individual, what is the meaning of wealth of the individual? What is wealth? Total wealth of an individual is the total asset minus their liability. Or asset कैसे बनता है? By accumulation of income. Right? So when I'm talking about wealth, it will always be a point in time. I'll not say wealth of what time. I'll say what is the present wealth. आपकी 2024 में wealth क्या थी? 2023 से 24 I'm not saying. That is a income. So when I compare, it becomes compiled, that becomes a stock variable. Another example, if a person is having an income of say 20 rupees and उसका उस दिन का expenditure है 30 rupees. That means he is spending more than what he has. How can he spend more than what he has? It can only happen when they are borrowing. That means I have a particular deficit on this day, deficit was of 10. So I have borrowed 10 rupees. Next day also I am having an income of 30, but my expenditure is of 40. Next day also I have a deficit is of 10. That means this deficit, what I am defining, what is expenditure more than the income, I am doing it with a start point and end point. Deficit starting of the day and end of the day. तो एक दिन का आपका deficit क्या है? But if I want to know how much of his deficits have accumulated, 10 was one day, second was 10 another day. So what is the total accumulation of deficit he has? 20. This total deficit is what is called as debt. For example, government this year is saying we have expenditure of 2 lakh crore rupees and the income is 1.5 lakh crore rupees. That means 50,000 crore is the deficit. But government has deficit from previous years also. All the combined deficit is what is called as debt. So deficit is a flow variable, debt is a stock variable. Now if you use the same definition, what is GDP? Is GDP a flow or a stock? GDP is a flow. When we are saying specific time period, that means GDP का start point होगा और end point होगा. Example, GDP of the year 2023. So what exactly was the GDP when 2022 ended, and what is the production of this year? So GDP will always have a time component. GDP of one quarter. तो quarter कब start हुआ, quarter कब end हुआ है, इसमें कितना production हुआ है. और GDP of a specific time period, say 1 year. GDP of India in 2023 was this. That means starting point was January, ending point was December. Just an example. That means GDP is nothing but a flow variable. You can write down this. GDP is a flow variable. GDP is a flow variable. That means it has a start point and an end point. It has a start point and an end point. In the next slide, any variable that is measured across a period of time, any variable that is measured across a period of time is referred to as a flow variable. Across a period of time is referred to as a flow variable. Example, income, deficit, expenditure, etc. In the next slide, any variable that is measured at a particular point in time, is referred to as a stock variable. Example, wealth, debt, etc. Is this clear? What is the meaning of GDP? Market value or a monetary value? By saying monetary value, because some of the goods which are produced for own consumption are also included. Not some, all goods for own consumption are included. The services are not. This is why market value or monetary value. Final means cannot be reprocessed. So consumer and capital goods. Then all goods and services produced in a domestic territory. Domestic territory means GDP is a territorial concept. किसी एक area का बताएगा कितना production. In a specific time period, that means GDP will always have a start point and an end point. GDP of 1 month, GDP of 1 quarter, GDP of 1 year. Is this clear? Now, how do we measure the growth percentage? If I want to know growth, what is the meaning of growth? What is the meaning of growth? Rate of increase. I said rate of increase of output. Now, if I want to measure the rate of increase of output, what is the GDP telling me? GDP is telling me how much quantity I have produced in a particular year and multiplied by its price. This is what is the GDP monetary value. Similarly, if I want to measure how much the growth has happened across previous year, so I will calculate GDP in 2024 and I will calculate GDP in 2023. That means quantity in 2023 multiplied by price in 23. Now if I measure the growth percentage here, one of the issues that can happen here is, what if the quantity did not increase, only price increased? ये भी तो हो सकता है, that I have produced 5 tables and the price of the table was 100 rupees, so my total GDP becomes 500. Now previous year I had produced 8 tables, but those 8 tables were produced for say 50 rupees. I had produced more, but I produced at a lesser value. That means total GDP here is 400. So growth तो हुआ है, but output has not increased. What has increased is price. So how exactly will I change or how will I calculate the change in output? Growth means change in output, but here it's changing in price. Output in fact reduce हो गया है. This particular concept, when I measure the GDP using the same year quantity and same year price, it is called as nominal GDP. Nominal GDP of a country means quantity current multiplied by price of the current year. So you can write down this definition. Nominal GDP measures the output. Nominal GDP measures the output at the current year prices. Nominal GDP measures the output at the current year prices. This is what is the formula, quantity current into price current, right? Now if I use nominal GDP for calculation, I saw a problem that prices might change, quantity might not change. So how will I measure the growth percentage only in terms of quantity? I want to know quantity, output तो मेरा वही change हो रहा है. Price का value I have to remove. How will I do that? For that, we calculate something called as real GDP. Real GDP is measuring the GDP of the country using the current quantity but multiplied with a constant price. This price which is constant, this is the price of base year. Now what will happen? So you can write this down, real GDP is quantity current into price constant. Now using the same example, price in 2024 was 100, price in 2023 was 50. Now what if I make a base year of 2015? 2015 mein the price of this table was say 70 rupees, right? Now using this same particular example, what is the real GDP in 2024? 5 into, what is the real GDP in 2023? 8 into 70. That means if I measure the growth percentage now, have I removed the impact of price? How? Price का impact कैसे नहीं हटा? How do I measure the growth percentage? What is the growth percentage? The price of this year, 5 into 70. What is the base with which I am doing? 8 into 70. And what is the impact of the price removed? I came to know how much is the quantity change that happening. That means any country trying to know the growth percentage only in terms of output will always measure its growth percentage using real GDP. Real GDP of 2024 minus real GDP of 2023 divided by real GDP of into 100. ऐसे ही calculate करता है. Percentages are calculated like this only. This minus this upon the base. So growth percentage is always comparison of nominal GDP. Now, if I compare nominal and real GDP, nominal GDP upon real GDP, this will give me the price information of the 2 years, price today and price of base. Similarly, I compare nominal GDP by real GDP of next year. Nominal by real of 2024, nominal and real of 2025. इन दोनों से मुझे पता चल जाएगा परसेंटेज इन्फ्लेशन. This particular value is telling me 2024 to 2025, this nominal GDP is telling me price of 2025 upon price of base. I compare it with price of 2024 with the price of base. क्वांटिटी कैंसिल आउट हो जाएगी दोनों में, तो इन दोनों में मुझे पता चल जाएगा कितना प्राइस चेंज हुआ है. दिस पर्टिकुलर कैन गिव मी द परसेंटेज चेंज इन प्राइस. This percentage change in price, this is nothing but measurement of inflation, and this nominal upon real GDP value, this is what is called as GDP deflator. Is it making sense? ये इतना आसान नहीं है. I'll explain it in detail in inflation. सबसे important चीज़ है, आप real GDP calculate कैसे करोगे? How will you calculate real GDP? Base year. First write down, comparing nominal to real GDP, or the ratio of nominal to real GDP. The ratio of nominal to real GDP can help measure the inflation across any 2 years, can help measure the inflation across any 2 years, and this measurement tool is called as GDP deflator. This is called as GDP deflator. You can write down this, nominal upon real. I'll explain in detail how exactly this happens, or anyhow just a question. Nominal GDP is price into quantity. आप real कैसे calculate करोगे? What is real GDP? Real GDP is quantity current into price of. How will you calculate this value? Today's value you can know, for example, agriculture ने कितना quantity into price के आपको market में पता चल जाएगा. How much has been sold, how much has been left, that also can be calculated. But how will you find present quantity into price of base? फैक्टर कॉस्ट पे भी प्राइस है, तो आपके पास तो टोटल वैल्यू आई है ना. मुझे क्या पता चला 500 रुपये का प्रोडक्शन हुआ, क्वांटिटी इनटू प्राइस पता चला. क्वांटिटी अलग और प्राइस अलग तो नहीं पता है, तो फिर आप कैसे मल्टीप्लाई करोगे दोनों को? अंडरस्टैंड द प्रॉब्लम? Just find out how you'll do that. It's very interesting. I'll explain it in the inflation class. Is deflator clear? Percentage growth clear? Percentage growth में real GDP compare हो रही है. This is the percentage growth. It's always comparison of real GDP. To give it a simplistic understanding, see what is happening. What is real GDP of 2024? What is real GDP of 2024? Quantity of 24 multiplied by price of base minus quantity of multiplied by price of base and quantity of multiplied by price of base. Now see from this example, have I diluted the impact of price? Price will cancel out, so I will only have calculation of quantities. So this is what is the measurement of growth in terms of quantity. So if I want to measure impact of both, it is your nominal GDP. If I only want to measure the growth in terms of output change, that is real GDP. So whenever we say 7% growth हुआ इस quarter में, quarter 2 of this year, quarter 2 of last year. This is what I'm comparing, but I'm comparing the real GDP, not the nominal. So if we say India had 5.6% growth in the second quarter, तो पिछले second quarter से इस quarter में 5.6% growth हुआ है only in output terms, not in price terms. Price terms में 11-12% क्या होगा? Because price also can have a change. Is it clear how it is done? How real GDP is calculated is quite technical. That we'll discuss when I discuss inflation, क्योंकि CPI, WPI बताना पड़ेगा उसमें. Is GDP deflator concept clear? If US embassy has a defense deal with India, India is considered to be part of GDP. What is happening in the defense deal? Production कहाँ पे हो रहा है वो decide करेगा what exactly is part of GDP or not. Embassy does not have a role to play in these deals otherwise also. Embassy का खुद का काम है. What does the embassy do? What is the function of embassy in a society? Yes, it's providing you the entry into that particular country. तो वो वीज़ा सर्विस के लिए फीस चार्ज करता है, तो उन्होंने सर्विस प्रोड्यूस की. वी आर ट्राइंग टू नो वो सर्विस किसकी जीडीपी में ऐड होगी, इंडिया की या यूएस की. सिंस इट इज़ अ यूएस एम्बेसी इन इंडिया, इट इज़ देयर टेरिटरी, इट विल बी एडेड इन देयर जीडीपी. इंडियन एम्बेसी आउटसाइड विल बी एडेड इन इंडियन जीडीपी. दिस इज व्हाट द आइडिया इज. इज दिस क्लियर? इज जीडीपी परसेंटेज ग्रोथ क्लियर? जीडीपी डिफ्लेटर. नाउ अनदर रिलेटेड कॉन्सेप्ट टू जीडीपी is the concept of net domestic product. Net domestic product, we discussed gross domestic product. Now we are talking about net domestic product. What is the difference between gross and net? Large difference, English word meaning only. Gross और net में क्या फर्क होता है? Can you give any example? What is intermediary? Intermediary तो हमने काउंट ही नहीं किया जीडीपी में. Indirect tax, no. What is the meaning of gross and net? वो तो you're just telling me कि यहाँ पे क्या हो सकता है? No. For example, if you get a package from Amazon, the whole package might have a weight. That is the gross weight. If you remove the packaging, you know what the material is. That is called the net. So any variable that does not have any deductions, any concessions, that particular becomes a gross variable. The moment you are deducting something from the gross variable, it becomes a net variable. For example, you are buying this, say, water bottle. वाटर बॉटल का ग्रॉस वेट है और एक नेट वेट होगा. ग्रॉस वेट होगा पूरा प्रोडक्ट का वेट, नेट वेट होगा सिर्फ पानी का वेट कितना है उसमें, बॉटल का वेट हटा के. दिस इज व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ ग्रॉस एंड नेट. ग्रॉस इज ऑल इंक्लूसिव, net means deductions, any particular deductions can happen. This is gross and net. Now in GDP, what could be reduced? Now what is happening in GDP? GDP is a gross concept, means it includes everything. But what should not be included is, whenever a particular firm has bought a capital good, this capital good is losing value with respect to time. Whether used or not used, this capital good will lose value over a period of time. Now it is losing value, and this loss of value is gradual. ये immediate नहीं है, gradual loss of value है over a period of time, whether used or not used. Value lose हो रही है, use है तो definitely it is being reduced, नहीं भी हो रहा तब भी reduction होता है. Now in order to capture this gradual loss of value, the factory might be keeping certain money apart. Every firm keeps a provision for those assets. Whatever capital good is losing value, I keep certain money apart for loss of this value. This particular provision which I keep for a gradual loss of value, this provisioning is called as depreciation. Otherwise, the technical name of depreciation, that is called as consumption of fixed capital. Whatever fixed capital goods the company has, उसका consumption के लिए मैंने एक provision रखा है. I have set certain money apart. When I set this money apart, this depreciation is also counted as one of the expenditure of the firms. Now when I'm counting this as an expenditure of the firm, is this depreciation adding to any production flow? When we discussed GDP, we said anything that is produced, count the expenditure or count the income. If I'm counting the expenditure, I counted the depreciation. But is the depreciation which the expenditure firm is doing, is it leading to production to any good or service? That is why, in order to remove it or reach the net, we will remove from the gross the expenditure that has been done on depreciation. So GDP adjusted for depreciation, also called as consumption of fixed capital, allowance of for consumption of fixed capital, that is depreciation, I will reach net. Why have I removed the depreciation? Sorry, because depreciation is not adding to the flow of production. Is this clear? You can write this down. GDP is adjusted for depreciation to arrive at the net domestic product depreciation can be defined as a provision kept aside for the gradual loss of value of capital goods. It is also referred to as an allowance for consumption of fixed capital. Sorry, allowance for consumption of fixed capital. Is this clear? Since depreciation is not leading to any production flow, this is why depreciation should not be included. This is why gross minus depreciation total of the economy is referred to as net domestic product. Now, similar to depreciation, there is another provision which a company might keep. That provision is called as capital loss. Just like we said, depreciation is a provision kept for gradual loss. Sometimes what can happen is there can be a sudden loss which is complete loss. So for example, a firm faces a very dire situation जहाँ पे flood आ जाए उस पूरी factory में, तो उसकी machine पूरी खराब हो गई. Sudden and complete loss of value of asset. If I keep money aside for that also, that is called as capital loss. Depreciation is the gradual loss of value over a period of time. धीरे धीरे value कम हो रही है. But if the value loss is sudden and it is a complete loss, for that also the firms can keep certain money as part. That is called as capital loss. But we do not include capital loss because capital loss is not compulsory that every firm does it. वो बहुत optional है, not every firm does it. But depreciation is something which all the firms do because this helps them buy the new machine, or depreciation पे taxation benefits भी मिलता है. If you try to have money for depreciation, there are taxation benefits also received. This is why firms will practice or keep a provision apart for depreciation. Capital loss ka it's not compulsory. Capital loss happens when there is sudden and complete loss. You can write this down. If a firm keeps a provision for sudden and complete loss of value, it is referred to as capital loss provision. Is this clear? Now, what are the three methods of GDP? Expenditure, income, production, and also the concept of GNP. We'll discuss in the next class. Just revise all of this. If you have any doubts, we'll take up the doubts first, and then we'll continue with the concept of GNP and the three methods of estimation of GDP. Once that is done, we'll discuss. So now I'll tell you the meaning of all of these four terms, C plus G plus I, कि क्या extensively cover होता है here, and also income, also production method, why it is value added. Once we are done with that, we'll discuss the concepts of growth and development. Technically, what is growth, I've told you, but what exactly is the conceptual meaning of growth and development and how it is measured, we'll discuss it in the next class. Just revise all of this. Next class, we'll take GNP and methods of estimation. Thank you.